Effects of population on resources. We cannot ignore the effects of population on resources. Population growth in the world has a direct effect on resources and population. For example, as more people move into an area, natural resources become scarcer. The impact of people on resources can be seen in many different ways. In this blog post, we will explore how population affects natural resources such as water, food production, and energy sources, to name a few. Effects of population on resources in the developing world. The population in developing countries has increased 5 times faster than in the rest of the world. 1 out of every 7 people lives on less than $2 a day, which affects their resources and health levels drastically. The lack of clean water causes diseases like cholera to spread quickly throughout certain areas because it is difficult for children or elderly citizens to travel far distances each time they need fresh drinking sources. Mainly due to overpopulation occurring in these regions as well as natural disasters such as earthquakes that can destroy infrastructure preventing access to food and prevent sewage from being quickly disposed of around townships. This leads not just small family units but entire communities into poverty cycles where more young mothers continue having babies without considering how much better off she'll be if she had less children. Global populations continue to rise exponentially, and the resources in underdeveloped countries dwindle. Experts estimate that by 2050, the human population will grow from 7 billion people today to 11 to 13 billion people on Earth, an increase of 50%. This is a startling figure considering that even now, there are 800 million who live without adequate food supplies or access to clean water. As more land becomes overpopulated and natural habitats disappear, these issues only worsen with time as well. The effects of this global crisis have already been felt here at home. California's snowpack has shrunk 37% since 1950 while wildfire season lasts longer than before due to climate change. Back east, we've seen Hurricane Sandy devastate New York City for days because coastal towns were unprepared. These are all because of increased population. Effects of population on resources in the developed world. The people of developed nations are reaching a point where it will be hard to sustain the use and consumption rates that have been established. The increase in average life expectancy has also contributed to this issue. As people live longer, they consume more resources than those who die young from illness or violence. People often blame the population for poor resource management. But is it really their fault? We must consider that in most developed countries, people live very differently than in other places around the world. For example, 2/3 of Americans own 1 or more cars, and yet only 6% have a motorbike, World Bank. This means they're using fuel inefficiently by not being able to take advantage of alternative transportation methods like walking or biking. Another detail worth considering is how much food we waste every day, with up to 40% never making it from farm to fork according to Fern's report. Wasted food estimates this year alone can feed at least 25 million hungry people. Even in developed countries, the rising population is becoming a problem. More and more of our resources are being used up by each new citizen we have because as time goes on, there will be less available for everyone else. Effects of population on resources in urban areas. As our population continues to grow, the resources in urban areas are becoming increasingly scarce. This has led many people to believe that humans will ultimately find themselves living on an Earth with a drastically reduced supply of food and water available for human needs. This is called sustainability. It's essential we use what little time remains before these things run out so as not to have any regrets about it later. Right now, there may be some solutions or ways around them, but who knows how long they'll last. Urban areas are straining under the weight of overpopulation. This is evidenced by a reduction in resources, such as water and food from natural sources like rainforests and farmland, respectively. In order to combat this dilemma, we need to be more proactive with conservation efforts for these vital supplies around urban centers so that those who live there can have access to them without disrupting their quality of life too much or having an adverse reaction to public health. Effects of population on resources in rural areas. It is not about the few individuals who live in rural areas but rather, and it's about how they will affect the country as a whole. One of these ways could be through resources and population growth, which can lead to an increased need for food, water, shelter, leading people to migrate from other parts of their own city or state into this area. One of the many reasons why population can have an effect on resources is that as a society's population grows, so does its demand for goods. The problem with this growth pattern and how it affects rural areas, in particular, is less about more people needing food or water than what to do with all their trash. If there isn't enough infrastructure to keep up and handle these needs, individuals might resort to dumping garbage into nearby streams. This has serious consequences when you consider just how much waste gets carried downstream by rainwater. Communities where landfill sites are scarce may find themselves inundated by large quantities of debris after heavy rains because they lack the capacity necessary for handling them properly. Effects of population on natural resources. The population of humans on Earth is increasing at an exponential rate. This means that in the next 10 to 20 years, there will be many more people who need access to natural resources like food and water than ever before. One proposed solution would involve constructing new sustainable cities where we can grow our crops without harming any ecosystems around us, for example, by using hydroponics or vertical farming methods which don't require pesticides because they take place indoors with artificially controlled environments to ensure maximum efficiency for plant growth. Population growth is a concern for the future of natural resources. The more people in an area, the greater the need to access water and food supplies as well as reducing biodiversity. For example, New York City consumes nearly 4 times its daily allotment of fresh water each day, making them vulnerable when faced with drought or emergencies where they have no other available source to draw from. Effects of population on human resources. The population is soaring, and human resources are plummeting. More people means more need for schools, teachers, doctors, and nurses. But as the world's most populous country with a population of over 1 billion people that also has one of the oldest populations in history, China faces many challenges on how to provide these needs without sacrificing other critical sectors like education or healthcare, which have been historically underfunded by their government due to an economic focus on manufacturing industry rather than agriculture/trade. Firstly, questioning why there may be problems providing enough personnel. Secondly, looking at possible solutions through increased investments into rural areas where China's economy could expand beyond its current state but not necessitating urbanization, meaning the world population is growing at a rapid pace, and in order to maintain resources for everyone on the planet, we must ensure that adequate food sources are available. Unfortunately, there will not always be enough land or water for this task as our population continues to expand exponentially. Effects of population on water resources. How often do you turn on the tap to find nothing coming out? It's not just an inconvenience in your day-to-day life, and it has real consequences for our planet. With more and more people inhabiting this world, we need a way of managing population growth so that water resources can be re-established as reliable sources without depletion or pollution occurring from overuse. The rate of population growth is increasing, and as a result, we are consuming more water. For example, in the US alone, it took about 4 billion gallons per day to produce food for all citizens by 2010, meaning that people were using nearly 2 times what was needed. Water sustainability has become an issue because not enough fresh, clean drinking supplies exist or will be available if this trend continues at its current pace. Scientists predict there could come a time when demand exceeds supply, which would lead us into crisis mode, where rationing becomes necessary, like back during World War II with gas shortages, etc. The salty ocean may gradually turn brackish due to saltwater displacement from rising sea levels while humans continue polluting surface waters by dumping trash into rivers. Effects of population on resources. Effects of population on food supply. Humans have been a part of the world for thousands and thousands of years, but in recent decades we've seen unprecedented growth. There are currently more than 7 billion people on Earth, with an average life expectancy that is increasing year by year. With so many humans living here now and our population expected to reach 8 billion within just 20 to 30 years, there's no question how vital food supply has become when it comes to maintaining humanity as we know it today. The more people there are, the greater demand for food. This means fewer resources and higher prices of food become available to everyone as time goes by. Families who can't afford this will starve, which is a terrible thing that we have done in society today. The population explosion is always a cause for concern, and it's even more so when we look at the effects of this on the food supply. There are many different factors that affect our ability to maintain good access to healthy food sources: rising prices in supermarkets, lack of funding for government programs aimed at alleviating hunger worldwide, changing diets due to globalization, etc. But one aspect often overlooked or not given enough consideration is the rise in world populations. As humans continue expanding their reach across Earth's surface, with no signs of slowing down anytime soon, they take up valuable natural resources like fertile land and water with them as they go, leaving less room than ever before for other species who depend on these vital resources. Effects of population on resources. Effects of population on land resources. The population has a significant effect on land resources, and not just because of the need for food. Population growth is also causing an increase in buildings, roads, and infrastructure all around us that are making it harder to find natural spaces where we can go to get away from life's distractions. In addition to needing more room for agriculture crops due to increased demand with growing populations worldwide who want fresher produce year-round instead of storing up during seasons when there is excess supply like wintertime, this creates pressure on agricultural lands as farmers must turn their fields over much more often than they used to, which makes farming practices less sustainable. Overall. Effects of population on resources. Effect of population on mineral resources. The population will continue to grow. People need minerals like copper and iron for food production, electricity distribution, etc., so the demand is going up while supply goes down because of natural resource depletion. The human race's insatiable thirst for resources has caused an unsustainable exponential growth in consumption rates with no end in sight until we learn from our past mistakes by investing more heavily into recycling initiatives and developing sustainable practices that don't rely on exploiting nature as an easy fix solution. Population growth is causing significant problems in the world, and one of these issues that we see more often than before is how it's affecting mineral resources. More people means less space to go around, but also a need for minerals like copper, lead, and zinc because they make up items such as electronics or batteries. This has led some countries where mining was once prevalent, for example, Chile, to now be importing minerals from other places with lower populations instead due to its own limited natural supply. This causes them not only money lost on export/import taxes, additionally, their exports may have higher prices when supplying abroad while imports become cheaper domestically, which can cause inflationary pressures amongst consumers who buy those products here at home. Effects of population on energy resources. Energy has always been an essential part of society and cannot be ignored in the face of a growing population. As we continue to grow, our need for energy continues as well, which is why it's so complicated to figure out how much power we can produce without harming people or the environment. Population growth causes countries such as China that have already placed limits on their resources due to pollution levels. The population of the world is growing exponentially, and with this growth comes a need for more energy. This has led to the global debate on how we can supply our needs while being conscious about conservation efforts at home and abroad, as well as traditional methods like solar power in developing countries that don't have access to electricity grids. In a nutshell, it means that our needs will be greater than ever before. The easiest way to combat these problems would be through conserving energy, which can help lower CO2 emissions by 20%. Not only will we have more breathing room in terms of supplies, but also with regard to carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere if people could make an effort not to use so much power every day. Effects of population on resources. Effect of population growth on capital resources. The effect of population growth on capital resources is a long-standing topic in the field, but one that has been increasingly debated and researched as an essential aspect of sustainable development. The challenges from overpopulation are wide-ranging and not all easily solvable. Population density can affect everything from climate change to food security. With too many people, natural habitats for wildlife will be destroyed, making it difficult for animals to find places suitable enough to live. We need solutions before we run out of space. The population is growing at an exponential rate, and this poses a significant problem for the world's capital resources. The foundation of any society relies on its people to contribute in some way or another to the community as well as maintain orderliness within it. When there are too many people competing for limited natural materials such as food and water, everyone suffers because these items become scarce, affecting not only those who cannot afford them but also those that rely on them heavily when they need quality sustenance, like children whose growth depends largely upon what they eat every day. If we do nothing about reducing our numbers, then eventually, we will have no choice but resign ourselves to poverty-stricken lives with few ways out until the earth can regenerate enough material resources.